My husband's glow-up has turned our friends into vultures, and I don't know how to protect my peace anymore. I never thought I'd be the wife writing something like this. You see the posts. My partner got hot and now everyone wants them, and you roll your eyes. You think, good for them. Good for the relationship. Stop being insecure. But I'm sitting here at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, glass of wine in hand, staring at our bedroom ceiling while my husband, Caleb 31M, sleeps soundly next to me. And I feel like I'm losing my mind. Let me back up. I'm Morgan, 30F. Caleb and I have been married for 6 years, together for 9. We met in grad school at the University of Oregon. I was getting my master's in social work, he was in the final year of his architecture program. Back then, Caleb was what you'd call cute in a nerdy way. Soft around the edges, a little shy, thick glasses, always wearing band tees from the early 2000s, hair that he'd let grow too long then chop off in a panic. I loved him exactly like that. I still love him. That's not the problem. The problem started about 14 months ago. Caleb's dad had a massive heart attack at 58. Scared the hell out of both of us. His dad survived, but the doctors sat the family down and said, "This is genetic, and if you don't change your lifestyle, you're looking at the same fate by 50. Caleb took it seriously. He hired a personal trainer, started meal prepping, cut out beer, he was a big IPA guy, and got into rock climbing at a gym in downtown Portland where we live. I supported him 100%. I drove him to his 6 a.m. sessions when his car was in the shop. I learned to cook high-protein, low-carb meals even though I burned toast half the time. I cheered him on when he hit his first pull-up, then his 10th, then his 20th. But here's the thing no one warns you about. When a person who has been invisible for most of their adult life suddenly becomes conventionally attractive, it doesn't just change them. It changes everyone around them. And it changes how those people treat you. Caleb is now 6 feet 1 inch, 190 pounds of lean muscle. He still has his kind eyes and that crooked smile, but now his jawline could cut glass. He grew out his beard and actually maintains it. He started dressing better because his old clothes didn't fit, tighter shirts, nice jackets, boots. He looks like a completely different person. Our own neighbors didn't recognize him at first. And our friends? Our friends have lost their damn minds. Let me name names because I need you to understand the cast of characters here. There's Vanessa 32F. She's been my closest friend since we worked together at a nonprofit in Portland 5 years ago. We've cried together over breakups, hers, job losses, mine, and the death of her cat, Mr. Whiskers. She was my maid of honor. She knows everything about me, my childhood, my fears, my insecurities. There's Derek 33M, Vanessa's husband. Good guy, works in tech, plays bass in a cover band. He and Caleb used to bond over being the less attractive halves of their marriages. Derek's words, not mine. I always hated that framing, but I understood the camaraderie. There's Jenna 29F, who joined our group about 3 years ago through a book club. She's single, loud, gorgeous in an intimidating way, and has never had a filter. I used to love that about her. She'd say what everyone else was thinking. And there's Marcus 34M and his wife Tessa 34F. They're the stable ones. The ones with a kid Mila, 6 and a sensible minivan. I always felt safest with them. The first incident was small. I almost didn't notice it. About 8 months ago, we had a barbecue at Vanessa and Derek's house. Their backyard in southeast Portland is lovely, string lights, a fire pit, the works. Caleb showed up in a fitted Henley and jeans. I watched Vanessa's eyes go from his face to his chest and back to his face. She laughed a little too hard at a joke he made about the weather. Then she put her hand on his forearm, just for a second, while she was handing him a beer. I told myself I was being paranoid. Vanessa is tactile. She hugs everyone. It meant nothing. Then Derek started making jokes. Damn, bro, leave some women for the rest of us. Ha ha, hilarious. Caleb laughed it off. I laughed it off. But Derek kept going. For real, though, you're making the rest of us look bad. Morgan, you better watch out. He said that last part to me, with a wink. I felt my stomach drop, but I smiled and said, I'm not worried. I should have been worried. The turning point was 2 months ago at Jenna's birthday party. She rented out the back room of a bar in the Alberta Arts District. There were maybe 20 people there. I was standing with Tessa near the bar, talking about Mila's first grade play, when I saw Jenna pull Caleb onto the small dance floor. That's fine. People dance at parties. But then she wrapped her arms around his neck, pressed her body against his, whispered something in his ear that made him pull back with an awkward laugh. And then she kissed his cheek, close to the corner of his mouth. I froze. Tessa saw it too. She squeezed my arm and said, "Did you see that?" I nodded. She said, "I'll talk to her. Tessa is good like that." She walked over, said something to Jenna with a sharp smile, and Jenna laughed and stepped back. But the damage was done. I spent the rest of the night pretending to have fun while watching Jenna find reasons to touch Caleb's shoulders, his back, his hands. On the drive home, I asked Caleb, "What did Jenna whisper to you?" He looked confused. "What?" On the dance floor, she whispered something. What was it? He was quiet for a second. Then, she said, "You've aged like a really fine whiskey and I want a sip." I nearly made him pull over. She what? I told her that was inappropriate, he said quickly. I stepped back. You saw me step back. I saw you laugh. Awkward laugh. Morgan, I was uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make a scene at her birthday. I believe him. I do. Caleb is not a confrontational person. He's the guy who apologizes when someone else bumps into him. But that night, I went to bed feeling something I'd never felt before in our marriage. Genuine, hot, sickening jealousy. And shame for feeling it. Since then, it's escalated. Vanessa started texting Caleb directly. Nothing explicit, just memes, reels, questions about his workout routine. But she never used to text him. She'd text me, and I'd relay. Now she bypasses me entirely. I mentioned it to her once, lightly. "Hey, you and Caleb have gotten chatty." She rolled her eyes and said, "Oh my God, don't be that wife. We're friends. It's fine. But it doesn't feel fine." Last week, we were all at Marcus and Tess's for game night. Derek got drunk, really drunk. He kept slapping Caleb on the back, telling him he was an inspiration. Then he said, "If I looked like you, I'd be cheating every weekend." Everyone went quiet. Vanessa turned red. Caleb said, "That's not funny, man." Derek doubled down. "Come on, don't pretend you don't notice. Women throw themselves at you now. You're telling me you haven't thought about it?" Caleb stood up. I've only seen him angry maybe 3 times in 9 years. He said, "I'm going to pretend you didn't say that because you're drunk. But don't ever say anything like that about my marriage again." Marcus walked Derek outside to sober him up. Vanessa apologized profusely, to Caleb, not to me. She hugged him and said, "I'm so sorry, he's an idiot, please don't hate us." I was standing right there. 2 feet away. She didn't even look at me. That's the part that breaks my heart the most. It's not just that our friends are attracted to my husband. It's that they've started treating me like an obstacle. Like I'm the killjoy standing between them and something they want. Vanessa used to call me her sister. Now she acts like I'm a speed bump. But the worst, the absolute worst, happened 4 days ago. Jenna threw a Galantini's party. Just the women. I almost didn't go, but Tessa said it would be good for me to get out. There were 8 of us. Wine, charcuterie, face masks, the whole thing. About 2 hours in, Jenna got wistful and started talking about her dating life. How she's tired of apps and wants a real man. Then she looked at me, directly at me, and said, "No offense, Morgan, but you really lucked out with Caleb. Like, do you ever feel guilty? He's out of your league now." The room went silent. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "Wow, okay." Tessa jumped in. "Jenna, that's incredibly rude." Jenna shrugged. "I'm just being honest. She asked me not to filter myself years ago. I'm not saying she's ugly. I'm just saying he's a solid 9 now and she's, like, a 6 on a good day. That's got to be hard. A 6 on a good day. I'm 5 feet 4 inches, 145 pounds. I have brown hair and brown eyes and a nose that's a little too big for my face. I've never been the hot friend. I've always been the nice friend. The funny friend. The reliable friend. And I was okay with that. I built an identity around that. But sitting there, listening to someone I considered a close friend rank me like livestock, I felt something crack inside me. I didn't cry. I finished my wine, made an excuse about a headache, and left. Tessa texted me 10 minutes later, "I'm so sorry. She's a bitch. You're beautiful. Don't let her get in your head." But she's already in my head. Here's where I need help. I don't want to lose my social circle. These are the people who helped us move into our first apartment. Who brought us casseroles when my mom died 2 years ago. Who dogs at for our golden retriever, Gus, when we went to Hawaii for our 5th anniversary. They've been family. But now I dread seeing them. Every gathering feels like a minefield. I watch Vanessa's hands. I watch Jenna's eyes. I watch Derek's mouth for the next inappropriate comment. I've started scanning rooms for where Caleb is and who's standing too close to him. I hate myself for it. I've never been a jealous person. I've never been that wife. I've talked to Caleb, he's horrified by all of it. He's offered to stop going to group events, to only hang out with Marcus and Tessa, to text me every time one of the women messages him. But that's not a solution, that's a band-aid. I don't want to isolate him. I don't want to become a prison warden. I want our old friends back, but I don't know if that's possible. I also know I need to set boundaries. But how? Please stop hitting on my husband, sounds paranoid. Please don't touch him, sounds controlling. And if I confront Jenna about the 6 on a good day comment, she'll say she was just joking and I'm being sensitive. That's her whole thing. I'm just brutally honest, you know that. Vanessa is the one who confuses me the most. She's married, she loves Derek I think. But she's also the one who said to me last month, you know, if you ever screw things up with Caleb, I wouldn't wait long to shoot my shot. She laughed when she said it. But her eyes didn't laugh. I'm losing sleep. I'm picking fights with Caleb about nothing because the real fight. Your existence is making our friends treat me like garbage, isn't fair to have. He didn't ask for this. He just wanted to not die of a heart attack at 50. Last night, I told Tessa everything over the phone. She listened for 45 minutes. Then she said something that's been rattling around in my skull. Morgan, it's not Caleb's body that changed your friends. It's their character. And you can't fix their character for them. I know she's right, but knowing and accepting are different things. So here I am, typing this at midnight, asking strangers on the internet. How do I fix this without losing my social circle? Is there a conversation I can have? A boundary I can set that doesn't make me look crazy? Do I pull back from the group and hope they notice? Do I confront each person individually? Do I just accept that I've outgrown these friendships and move on? I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be the wife who made her husband stop seeing friends because she couldn't handle the attention he gets. But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling like a placeholder in my own marriage while the people who are supposed to love me circle my husband like sharks.
What do I do?
Update. It's been 3 weeks since I wrote that post, and I honestly didn't expect to come back here. I thought I'd read the comments, feel a little validated, maybe try a few suggestions, and then quietly move on with my life. Instead, everything exploded in a way I never saw coming. I'm writing this from a hotel room in Cannon Beach. Caleb is asleep on the pull-out couch. Gus is curled up at my feet. And I think, we might be okay. But getting here cost us more than I ever imagined. First, thank you to everyone who commented on the original post. I read every single response, even the harsh ones. Some of you called me insecure and told me to get therapy. Some of you said my friends were never really my friends. Some of you pointed out that Caleb needed to be the one to shut things down more firmly, not just stand there and laugh awkwardly. I took all of it in. I showed Caleb the post on the second day. He read it in our kitchen while I pretended to scroll on my phone. When he finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I've been a coward. I'm sorry." That was the beginning. The first thing we did was agree on a united front. No more me handling my friends and him handling his. We were a team, or we were nothing. We wrote down specific boundaries together on a whiteboard we keep on the fridge. It felt stupid at first, like we were back in couples therapy from that rough patch in year 3, but it helped. Rule 1. Anyone who makes a comment about Caleb's appearance or our league difference gets one warning, then we leave. Rule 2. No one-on-one texting with Vanessa or Jenna unless I'm copied. Caleb pushed back on that one. He said it felt controlling. I told him it wasn't about controlling him. It was about removing the secret pipeline that Vanessa had created. He agreed after I showed him 3 screenshots of messages she'd sent him that I'd found when I looked at his phone. Yes, I looked. I'm not proud of it, but I looked. Things like, "You looked really good at Marcus's. Morgan's lucky," and, "Derek doesn't notice me anymore. Do you ever feel invisible in your marriage?" Caleb swore he hadn't encouraged her. He hadn't replied to those at all, but he also hadn't told me. He said he didn't want to upset me. I told him that keeping secrets was what upset me. We decided to test the waters with a small gathering. Tessa offered to host another game night, just the 6 of us this time. Me, Caleb, Marcus, Tessa, Vanessa, and Derek. No Jenna. Tessa quietly uninvited Jenna, saying it was just a couples thing. Jenna was furious. She texted me a wall of angry emojis and the words, "Wow." Excluding the single friend. Cool. I didn't respond. The night of the game night, I was a wreck. I put on a dress I hadn't worn in 2 years. I did my hair. Caleb kissed my forehead and said, "You're the most beautiful woman in any room." And I'm not just saying that. I wanted to believe him. We got to Marcus and Tessa's at 7 p.m. Derek was already drinking, not drunk yet, but that loose, loud version of him that appears after 2 IPAs. Vanessa was wearing a low-cut top that I'd never seen before. She hugged Caleb for 3 seconds too long. I counted, then she turned to me and gave me a stiff pat on the back. "Hey, Morgan, love that dress. Very forgiving." I don't even know what that means. Forgiving of what? My stomach? My mediocrity? I let it go. The first hour was fine. We played codenames. Marcus made everyone laugh. Tessa kept shooting me reassuring looks across the table. Caleb kept his hand on my knee under the table. I started to relax. I started to think maybe we'd overreacted. Maybe the comments were just bad jokes. Maybe Jenna was the only real problem. Then Derek got drunk. It happened around 8:30. He'd switched from IPAs to whiskey. His face was flushed. He started slurring, and he decided it was time to give Caleb a pep talk about handling the spotlight. I'll never forget his exact words because they're burned into my brain. He leaned across the table, pointed a wobbly finger at Caleb, and said, "Bro, you gotta understand, women are gonna throw themselves at you now. It's not if, it's when, and you gotta have a plan. Morgan's great, she's fine, but she's not gonna be enough forever. You feel me?" The room went silent. Caleb didn't laugh this time. He didn't look at me first. He stood up slowly, took his hand off my knee, and walked around the table to where Derek was sitting. He leaned down so his face was level with Derek's, and he said, quietly, calmly, in a voice I'd never heard from him, "Derek, I need you to hear me very clearly. If you ever speak about my wife like that again, I will end our friendship. Not pause it, end it, and if you ever imply that I need more than her, I will physically remove you from wherever we are. Do you understand?" Derek blinked, then he laughed. "Whoa, bro, chill, it was a joke." "It wasn't a joke," Caleb said. "And you know it wasn't a joke. Now apologize to Morgan." Derek looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at her hands. Derek mumbled, "Sorry, Morgan. Didn't mean anything." I said, "Okay," but it wasn't okay, and everyone knew it. Vanessa stood up suddenly. Her chair scraped against the floor. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face, something between anger and humiliation. "You know what, Morgan?" she said. "This is exhausting. You've become so insecure. Caleb gets in shape and suddenly you're monitoring every interaction, counting hugs, reading into everything. Derek was being stupid, but he's not wrong that you've changed. You used to be fun. Now you're just jealous." I opened my mouth to respond, but Caleb spoke first. "Vanessa, stop. You've been texting me things that are completely inappropriate. Telling me Morgan is lucky. Asking if I feel invisible in my marriage. That's not friendship. That's you testing the waters. And I've let it go because I didn't want to cause drama, but I'm done. You owe my wife an apology. Not for Derek, for you." Vanessa's face went pale, then red. Then she did something I'll never forget. She started crying. Not sad crying, angry crying. The kind where you can tell the person is furious that they've been caught. "I was just being friendly," she sobbed. "You're twisting everything. I've been nothing but a good friend to Morgan for years." Tessa stood up. "Vanessa, I saw the texts. She showed me. You asked her husband if he feels invisible. That's not friendly. That's predatory." And just like that, the mask was off. Vanessa grabbed Derek's arm and hissed, "We're leaving." Derek looked confused, like a dog being dragged off a couch. They walked out without saying goodbye. The door closed. Then silence. Marcus poured himself a drink and said, "Well, that's gonna be awkward at brunch." I laughed. I don't know why. Maybe because if I didn't laugh, I would have cried. Caleb came back to the couch and pulled me into his chest. He smelled like laundry detergent and the cedar cologne I bought him for his birthday. I buried my face in his shoulder and shook for about 5 minutes. Tessa brought me a blanket. Marcus put on some terrible indie music to fill the quiet. We stayed for another hour, just the 4 of us. Tessa and Marcus didn't take sides. They just sat with us. Marcus said, "For what it's worth, I've noticed Vanessa getting weird for months." I didn't say anything because I didn't want to start something. "I'm sorry." Tessa nodded. "We should have spoken up sooner." I told them it wasn't their job to manage other adults. But inside, I felt a small, mean part of me think, yeah, you should have. The next morning, my phone was a disaster. Jenna had somehow heard about the fight, probably from Vanessa, and had sent me a novel of a text. I'll summarize because my thumbs hurt just thinking about it. She said I was creating a toxic environment, that I was clearly threatened by any woman with confidence, and that my insecurity was going to push everyone away. She ended with, I was right about the 6th thing. You're acting like a 4. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and sent it to Tessa. Tessa replied, she's dead to me. Then Vanessa texted, 7 messages in a row. The first few were apologies. I'm so sorry. I was defensive. Derek is an idiot. Then they got weird. But you have to understand how hard it is to watch someone transform like that. It makes the rest of us feel like we're settling. Then, I love Derek, but he's never going to look at me the way Caleb looks at you. Then the final one. I need space from you for a while. This friendship isn't healthy for me. She flipped it. She actually flipped the whole thing so that she was the victim. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Then I blocked her number. I didn't even feel sad. I felt nothing. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. Caleb and I talked for hours that night. We sat on our back porch in Portland, wrapped in blankets, watching Gus chase fireflies in the dark. Caleb said he wanted to message Derek directly, not to fight, but to say goodbye. I told him to do whatever he needed. He sent a short text. Derek, I've loved you like a brother for years. But I can't be friends with someone who disrespects my wife. If you ever get sober and want to apologize, I'll listen. Until then, take care. Derek replied with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. 6 years of friendship, ended by a thumbs up. Jenna went nuclear on social media. She posted a vague status that said, some people can't handle their partners leveling up. Don't dim your light for someone else's insecurity. She didn't tag me, but everyone knew. 3 of our mutual friends reached out to ask what happened. I told them the truth. 2 of them said they'd noticed Jenna had a competitive edge around me for a while. The 3rd said, I don't want to pick sides. I told her not picking a side was picking a side. She stopped responding. So here's where we are now. Vanessa and Derek are out. Jenna is out. Marcus and Tessa are still in, solid as ever. We have brunch with them every Sunday now. It's smaller, quieter, but no one touches my husband's arm for 3 seconds too long. No one calls me a 6. No one asks Caleb if he feels invisible. But I'd be lying if I said I was fine. I've lost 3 friends in 2 weeks. Yes, they were flawed. Yes, they showed their true colors. But they were also the people who held my hair back when I had the stomach flu in 2019. Who drove me to the ER when I broke my ankle walking Gus, don't ask. Who cried with me at my mother's funeral. Grief doesn't care if the person was toxic. Grief just cares that they're gone. I started seeing a therapist last week. Her name is Dr. Patricia, she's 67 years old, and she has purple glasses and 0 patience for self-pity. I told her everything. She listened, nodded, and then said, Morgan, you didn't lose friends. You lost illusions. The friends you thought you had never existed. The women you're mourning were masks. The real Vanessa and Jenna were the ones who showed up the moment your husband became a commodity to them. And here's the hard truth. They were always capable of this. You just never gave them a reason to show it before. That hit me like a brick. Dr. Patricia gave me homework. She told me to write down 3 things I want in friendships going forward. Not, don't hit on my husband, too reactive. But positive things. So I wrote, loyalty that doesn't depend on my partner's appearance. Honesty without cruelty. Celebration of my wins, not just commiseration over my losses. Then she told me to read that list every morning. And to ask myself, did Vanessa ever meet that? Did Jenna? The answer was no, not really, not for a long time. Caleb has been incredible through all of this. He stopped going to the climbing gym at peak hours because he said the attention made him uncomfortable anyway. He started coming home with flowers for no reason. He asked me to go to couples therapy with him, not because we're broken, but because he wants to learn how to support me better. We had our first session yesterday. The therapist, a guy named Elliot in his 40s with a very calm voice, asked us both, what do you need from each other that you're not getting? Caleb went first. He said, I need Morgan to trust that I'm not going anywhere. And I need her to tell me when she's scared, instead of pretending she's fine. Then it was my turn. I cried for about 90 seconds before I could speak. Then I said, I need to feel like I'm enough. Not just for him, for myself. Elliot nodded. That's not a couples therapy problem. That's a Morgan problem. And the good news is, you can fix that. So that's my project now. Not fixing my friendships. Not policing my husband. Fixing the part of me that believed I was a 6 on a good day. The part that thought my value was tied to being the nice, funny, reliable one because I couldn't be the hot one. The part that spent years shrinking so other women could feel big. I'm not there yet. Last night, I caught myself in the bathroom mirror and thought, your skin looks tired. Then I stopped myself and said out loud, no. You look like a person who's been through something hard. And you're still here. Gus wagged his tail from the bathtub. He's weird. Caleb called from the bedroom, you talking to the dog or yourself? I said, both. He laughed. I laughed. And for a minute, it felt like maybe we'd be okay. We're in Cannon Beach now because Tessa insisted we take a weekend away. She booked the hotel room and wouldn't let us pay her back. She said, you two have been fighting for your marriage in a way no one should have to. Go stare at the ocean and remember why you picked each other. So we did. We walked on the beach this morning. Gus ran into the waves and immediately regretted it. Caleb found a sand dollar and gave it to me. He said, I know this is cheesy, but I want you to keep it somewhere you can see it. Every time you look at it, remember that I chose you. I keep choosing you, and I will always choose you. I put it in my jacket pocket. It's still there now, scratching against my phone. I don't know what happens next. Vanessa texted Tessa yesterday asking if I was ready to talk. Tessa told her I was taking space and wouldn't say more. Jenna has been posting non-stop about cutting out toxic people and glow-up season. I unfollowed her. I don't need to see that. Marcus called me this afternoon. He said, I know you're hurting, but I also know you're going to look back on this in a year and be grateful. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you'll see how small they made you feel without you even noticing. And you'll wonder why you ever let them. He's probably right, but right now, I'm still in the part where it hurts. So that's the update. No tidy ending. No dramatic confrontation where everyone apologizes and we all hug it out. Just a woman in a hotel room in Cannon Beach, Oregon, with a sand dollar in her pocket, a sleeping husband on a pull-out couch, a wet dog on her feet, and the very fragile, very new belief that maybe, just maybe, she was never the problem. Story 2. I told a mother her son isn't welcome in my yoga studio's adult classes anymore. I own a small yoga studio in Asheville, North Carolina. It's called Hummingbird Heart Yoga, and it's been my dream for 7 years. I'm 34 years old, my name is Brooke, and I poured my entire divorce settlement into this place after my ex-husband, Patrick, decided that his 26-year-old receptionist was more interesting than our 15-year marriage. The studio is my baby. It's painted in soft sage green and lavender. There are salt lamps in every corner. I have a sign on the wall that says, "Leave your ego at the door," and I mean it. I teach most of the classes myself because I can't afford a full-time staff yet. I have 2 part-time instructors, Diana, who's 57 and used to teach dance in Charlotte, and Marcus, who's 28 and does hot yoga in a way that makes people actually enjoy sweating. We're a small community. I know almost every member by name. I know their injuries, their triggers, their favorite spots in the room. I know which ones cry in Savasana and which ones need a gentle adjustment in Downward Dog. That's why what happened last week is tearing me apart. 3 months ago, a woman named Linda 52F signed up her son, Corey 19M, for a membership. Linda is a regular. She's been coming to my Wednesday morning slow flow for over 2 years. She's a pediatric nurse, kind of intense but in a warm way, always brings her own mat and this fancy cork block set. I like her. When she told me her son was going through a tough transition and needed a physical practice to ground him, I said absolutely. Yoga is for everyone. That's not just a marketing slogan to me. Corey showed up for his first class on a Thursday evening. It was my 6:30 p.m. all levels flow, typically about 14 people, mostly women between 30 and 55. Corey walked in wearing basketball shorts and a video game t-shirt. He had a messy mop of brown hair, acne along his jawline, and the kind of lanky, uncoordinated limbs that teenage boys haven't grown into yet. He looked nervous. I introduced myself, showed him where the loaner mats were, and pointed him toward a spot in the back corner near the window. He grunted something that might have been, "Thanks," and unrolled his mat with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to eat vegetables. The first class was fine. Not great, but fine. He couldn't hold a plank to save his life. He wobbled in tree pose like a baby deer. He looked at his phone twice, which I gently corrected after class. In the studio, we keep phones off the mat, I said. It's a space for presence. He nodded, shoved his phone in his bag, and left without saying goodbye. I figured he was shy. Some people are. The second class, 2 days later, was where the first red flag appeared. Corey positioned himself in the middle of the room instead of the back. Okay, fine, people move around, but during Warrior 2, I noticed him staring. Not looking, staring. His eyes were locked on a woman named Janelle 41F in the row in front of him. Janelle is a former competitive swimmer with broad shoulders and a powerful practice. She was wearing a teal sports bra and leggings, like half the women in the room. Corey's gaze wasn't wandering, it was fixed, intense, and when Janelle bent forward into a standing split, I saw Corey's head actually tilt to follow the movement. I told myself I was being paranoid. He's 19, he's a teenager. Teenagers look, it's biology, it doesn't mean anything. But then he started making sounds. Not loud ones, not moans or anything explicitly sexual, but soft, breathy exhales at moments that didn't match the rhythm of the class. A little during hip openers. A sharp inhale when someone adjusted their shorts. I was teaching, so I couldn't watch him constantly, but Diana was assisting that night. After class, Diana pulled me aside and said, "That new kid, Corey? He made me uncomfortable." I went to adjust his alignment in triangle, and he leaned into my hand. Like, intentionally. I pulled back and he smiled at me. Diana is not an alarmist. She's a grandmother of 3 who once taught a class through a panic attack because she didn't want to let anyone down. If she said it was off, it was off. I called Linda the next day. I was careful. I said, "Corey seems like he's settling in, but I've noticed some behaviors that might not be a good fit for the adult classes. He's very young, and the energy in the room is primarily women. I'm wondering if he'd be more comfortable in a different setting." Linda got defensive immediately. "He's not very young, he's 19. He's an adult, and he has social anxiety. You're not going to kick him out for being awkward, are you? That would be discrimination." I backpedaled. I said no, of course not, we just want everyone to feel safe. She said Corey felt safe for the first time in months. What was I supposed to say to that? So I let him stay. Over the next 10 weeks, things got worse incrementally. The kind of worse that makes you question your own perception because each individual incident is small, but the pattern is unmistakable. Corey started arriving early and lingering in the lobby, watching women walk in. He'd comment on their mats, their water bottles, their hair. "I like that color on you," he said to a woman named Priya 33F who was wearing a purple tank top. Priya thanked him politely and later told me she felt a weird vibe. Corey started positioning his mat directly behind specific women and mirroring their movements too closely. If someone adjusted her strap, he adjusted his. If someone retied her hair, he ran his hand through his own. It was mimicry, and it was unsettling. The breaking point happened last Tuesday. I was teaching a 9:30 a.m. gentle flow. Small class, only 8 people. Corey was there, which surprised me because he'd never come to a morning class before. Also in attendance was a new student named Elena 26F. Elena had signed up for a 2-week trial. She was soft-spoken, wore glasses, and had a visible tremor in her hands that she told me came from an anxiety disorder. She placed her mat in the front row, near the altar where I keep my singing bowls. About 20 minutes into class, we moved into a supine twist. Eyes closed, hands resting on the floor. This is a vulnerable position for a lot of people. Your belly is exposed, your hips are open, your eyes are closed, you're trusting the people around you. I was walking through the room, offering adjustments, when I saw Corey. He had shifted his mat during the transition. He was now directly next to Elena, not behind her, not in front, but parallel, with less than 2 feet between their mats. And his hand was on the floor, extended. His pinky finger was touching Elena's mat. Not her body, her mat, but he was reaching toward her like a plant stretching toward sunlight. Elena's eyes were still closed. She didn't know. I stopped the class. I said, "Everyone, please open your eyes and return to a seated position. I'd like to remind everyone that we maintain personal space on our mats. If you need more room, please raise your hand and I'll help you reposition." I looked directly at Corey. He looked back at me with flat, unblinking eyes. Then he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knows exactly what he's doing and is waiting to see if you'll call him on it. After class, Elena approached me at the front desk. She was shaking. "That guy," she said. "The young one. He was touching my mat. And during the twist, I opened my eyes for a second and he was just looking at me. Not glancing, looking, with his head turned toward me the whole time. I didn't feel safe. I apologized profusely. I told her I'd handle it. I gave her a free month of classes and walked her to her car. Then I called Linda. This time, I didn't backpedal. I said, "Linda, I need to be very direct with you. Corey has been exhibiting behaviors that make other students uncomfortable. He stares. He invades personal space. He made physical contact with a female student's mat during a closed eye posture. I cannot have him in adult classes anymore. It's not a good fit." Linda exploded. "He has Asperger's. He doesn't understand social cues. You're discriminating against a neurodivergent young man because he's a little awkward. Do you know how hard it's been for him? He was bullied all through high school. He doesn't have friends. Yoga was the first thing he felt good at, and now you're taking that away because some sensitive women can't handle a boy looking in their direction? I stayed calm. I said, Linda, I have students with autism in my classes. I have students with social anxiety, PTSD, and physical disabilities. I have never asked anyone to leave based on a diagnosis. I'm asking Corey to leave based on his behavior. The behavior is the problem, not the person. But I have a responsibility to keep every single person in that room safe. And right now, Corey is making people unsafe. She said she was going to leave a 1-star review everywhere. She said she was going to contact a lawyer. She said I was part of the problem, and that I should be ashamed for excluding someone who's different. Then she hung up. That was 6 days ago. The 1-star reviews have started coming in. 3 of them so far, all from accounts with no profile pictures and only 1 review each. Linda has also been posting in local Asheville Facebook groups, framing this as a story about a cruel yoga studio owner who kicked out an autistic teenager for being awkward. I've gotten angry DMs from people I've never met. Someone called the studio and left a voicemail calling me a ableist bitch. I haven't responded to any of it. But here's where I need to say this out loud, or write it, I guess. I don't know for sure that Corey has Asperger's. Linda only mentioned that after I tried to remove him. In our previous conversations, she called it social anxiety and awkwardness. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what his diagnosis is or isn't. And frankly, it doesn't matter. Because I've taught students on the spectrum before. A lovely young woman named Sophie 22F comes to my restorative class every Friday. She doesn't like eye contact, so I never force it. She stims during savasana, and I've made it clear that's welcome. She once accidentally kicked another student's mat during a wide-legged forward fold, and she apologized so profusely that I had to reassure her 3 times that it was fine. Sophie is autistic. Sophie has never made anyone feel unsafe. This isn't about neurodivergence. This is about a pattern of behavior that crossed a line, and I'm terrified that by saying that out loud, I'm going to be crucified. I've been losing sleep. I woke up at 3 a.m. this morning and just stared at the ceiling, running through every interaction with Corey, trying to figure out if I missed something. If I should have given more warnings. If I should have pulled him aside privately and had a conversation about boundaries before jumping to removal. I did pull him aside, twice. I said, Corey, I need you to keep your eyes on your own mat during practice. He said okay. Then he did it again. I said, Corey, please maintain 3 feet of space between you and other students. He moved back for one class, then crept closer the next. Diana thinks I did the right thing. Marcus thinks I waited too long. Janelle sent me a long email thanking me for protecting the container of the room. Elena hasn't come back, even with the free month, and I don't blame her. But then there's the other voice in my head. The one that sounds like my ex-husband Patrick, who used to tell me I was too sensitive, and made everything about feelings. The one that says, he's just a kid. He's lonely. He doesn't understand. You could have taught him. You could have been patient. You gave up on him. I called my own therapist, a woman named Dr. Rivera in Raleigh who I see via video every other week. She said, Brooke, your studio is not a therapeutic facility. You are not a social worker or an ABA therapist. You are a yoga teacher. Your primary responsibility is to the physical and emotional safety of everyone in the room. If one person's behavior is compromising that safety, regardless of the reason for that behavior, you have not only the right but the obligation to remove them. I know she's right, but knowing and feeling are different. Linda hasn't actually filed anything with a lawyer. I think it was a threat, but the court of public opinion is already in session, and I'm losing. A woman posted in the Asheville subreddit asking if anyone had experienced discrimination at Hummingbird Heart Yoga. The comments are a mess. Some people are defending me, saying they've taken classes there for years and always felt safe. Others are calling me a Karen and saying I should have tried harder to accommodate. One person said, this is why neurodivergent people can't have nice things. That one cut deep. I'm not looking for legal advice, necessarily. I know I'm within my rights as a private business owner to refuse service to anyone as long as it's not based on a protected class. And autism is a protected class under the AITA. But behavior that disrupts the safe enjoyment of a space by others is not protected. I've done my research. I'm not worried about a lawsuit. I'm worried about my conscience. So I'm asking, not for judgment, but for perspective. Am I the asshole here? Did I handle this wrong? Should I have tried harder to accommodate Corey before kicking him out? Should I have had a mediated conversation with him and Linda together? Should I have offered private sessions instead of banning him entirely? I didn't think of that until later. Private sessions, one-on-one, where he couldn't make anyone else uncomfortable. Why didn't I think of that? Because I was scared, I think. Because by the time Elena came to me shaking, I had already seen too much. Because Diana had already told me she felt uncomfortable. Because I kept a log. I actually kept a log of every incident, and when I read it back, it was 17 bullet points over 10 weeks. 17 times I noticed something that made me think, that's not okay. 17 times I said something or didn't say something or said something and nothing changed. Maybe I should have been more direct with Corey himself. Not just keep your eyes on your mat, but, Corey, the way you're looking at people is making them feel unsafe. If you can't stop, you can't come back. I never said that. I was too worried about hurting his feelings. Too worried about being the mean yoga lady who yelled at a neurodivergent kid. So I danced around it, and now here we are. I texted Linda this morning. I said, I would like to offer Corey 4 free private sessions with me, one-on-one, to see if we can find a way for him to practice safely in a group setting in the future. I'm not trying to exclude him. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. She hasn't responded. It's been 6 hours. I don't know what else to do. My studio feels different now. The salt lamps still glow. The lavender walls are still calm. But there's a heaviness. The regulars have been asking what happened, and I've been vague, but word gets around. Some of them have stopped coming. Not many, but some. I had a 79-year-old woman named Harriet tell me yesterday, "You did the right thing, honey. I've been practicing yoga since 1972, and I've seen too many teachers look the other way. You didn't. That matters." I wanted to believe her. But then I went home and saw another Facebook post calling me a bully, and I cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could go inside. So, that's where I am. I'm 34 years old. I own a small business that I love. I kicked out a 19-year-old kid who might or might not be autistic, who might or might not understand what he was doing, who might or might not have been able to change if I'd handled it differently. And I don't know if I'm a hero or a villain or just a tired woman trying to hold a safe space together with duct tape and good intentions.
What do you think?
Update. It's been 18 days since I wrote that post, and I honestly didn't expect to come back. Part of me hoped the whole thing would just fade away, that Linda would accept my offer of private sessions, or Corey would find another studio, or the Facebook mob would get distracted by some other local drama. None of that happened. Instead, things got louder, then quieter, then strange in a way I'm still processing. I'm writing this from the back office of Hummingbird Heart Yoga. It's 9:14 p.m. The studio is empty. The salt lamps are still on because I forgot to turn them off again. And I just finished a conversation that I need to put into words before I lose the shape of it. Let me start where the last post ended. I texted Linda offering 4 free private sessions for Corey. She didn't respond for 3 days. On the 4th day, she called me. Not texted, called. I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of teaching a beginner's class, and my phone was on silent, but I saw her name flash across the screen and my stomach dropped. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 37 seconds long. I still have it saved. Her voice was tired, not angry. She said, "Brooke, it's Linda. I've been thinking. I don't want to be enemies. I don't want to destroy your business. But I also don't think private sessions are the answer. Corey doesn't want to do yoga with you. He wants to do yoga with other people. That's the whole point. He's isolated enough. I'll call you back when I have a clearer head." Then she hung up. I waited. 2 more days passed. The 1-star reviews kept coming, up to 7 now, though 3 of them were from accounts that looked suspiciously like burner profiles. One person wrote, "The owner is ableist and cruel. My son has autism and I would never send him here." Another wrote, "I've never been to this studio but I'm horrified by what I've read." That one made me laugh in a bitter, hollow way. People review places they've never been now. That's just the internet. Then, last Wednesday, something unexpected happened. Corey showed up at the studio. Not for a class. He came in during my office hours, between the 10 a.m. gentle flow and the noon hot yoga. I was alone at the front desk, balancing my quarterly tax paperwork and trying not to cry over a spreadsheet. The little bell above the door chimed, and I looked up, and there he was. Corey, 19 years old, messy brown hair, acne along his jaw, wearing the same video game t-shirt from his first class. He stood in the doorway for a solid 5 seconds, blinking like a man who just walked into a bright room after a dark movie. I said, "Hi, Corey." He said, "My mom doesn't know I'm here." I didn't know what to do with that. I said, "Okay, do you want to sit down?" I gestured to the little bench near the shoe cubbies. He sat. He didn't take his shoes off. He just sat there, staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on his shorts. I waited. I've learned that silence is a tool, not a void. If you give people space, they'll fill it with what they actually need to say. After almost a full minute, Corey said, "I wasn't trying to be creepy." I didn't respond right away. I took a breath. I said, "I didn't think you were trying to be anything, Corey. But the impact of your behavior on other people was real. Those two things can both be true." He looked up at me then. His eyes were wet, not crying, but close. "I don't know how to be around people," he said. "I never learned. My mom homeschooled me from 6th grade because the bullying got so bad. I don't have friends. I don't know how to talk to girls. I don't know where to look or what to do with my hands. And when I tried yoga, I finally felt like I was in a room where people weren't going to make fun of me. But then I messed it up. I always mess it up." I felt something crack in my chest. Not the crack of breaking, the crack of thawing. I sat down on the bench next to him, leaving a full cushion of space between us. I said, "Corey, I need you to hear me. You are not a bad person. But your behavior was making people feel unsafe. Those two things are not the same. A good person can do harmful things without meaning to. And when that happens, the good person takes responsibility and changes the behavior." He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "I don't know how to change it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong." That stopped me. Because he was right. He genuinely didn't know. Linda had spent years protecting him from the world instead of teaching him how to move through it. She called it accommodation. But what she'd actually done was remove him from every situation where he could learn social skills organically. No wonder he was staring and leaning and touching mats. He had no framework. No one had ever said, "This is where the line is, and here's how you stay on the right side of it." I made a decision in that moment. I'm still not sure if it was the right one. I said, "Corey, I'm going to offer you something, and you can say no. I'm going to offer you 4 private sessions, not free, because I think you need to invest something in this, but at a reduced rate. $20 a session instead of $75. In those sessions, I'm not going to teach you yoga. I'm going to teach you how to be in a room with other people. Body awareness, gaze management, consent in physical space. If you complete those 4 sessions and I feel confident that you understand the boundaries, you can come back to group classes on a probationary basis. 1 strike. That's it. Do you understand?" He nodded. Then he said, "What's gaze management?" I almost laughed. "Almost. It's where you put your eyes so that other people don't feel watched." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Okay. I'll do it." We shook hands. His palm was sweaty, and he held on too long, and I had to gently pull away. But he was trying. I could see him trying. I called Linda that night. She cried on the phone. Not angry crying, relieved crying. She said, "I've been so scared. I've been so scared that I ruined him. That I kept him too close and now he doesn't know how to exist in the world." I told her I wasn't a therapist. I told her I wasn't qualified to do what I was offering. I told her that Corey needed professional support that went far beyond what a yoga studio could provide. She said he had a therapist, a man named Dr. Benson in Hendersonville, but Corey wouldn't talk to him. "He just sits there," Linda said. "For 50 minutes. In silence." I told her that wasn't my problem to solve. But I also told her I'd try. The private sessions started 5 days ago. The first one was awkward. Painfully awkward. Corey showed up on time, which surprised me. He brought his own mat. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the empty studio, and I sat across from him, and for the first 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "Corey, I need you to tell me what you think happened in those classes. From your perspective, no judgment." He thought about it, then he said, "I was just looking. I wasn't going to do anything. I'm not a predator." "I didn't say you were," I said. "But looking can feel like a threat to someone who doesn't know you. Especially when they're in a vulnerable position. Eyes closed, body open. Do you understand that?" He nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully understand. So I did something I've never done in a teaching context. I asked him to switch places with me. I said, "Lie down on your mat. Close your eyes. I'm going to stand over you and stare at you for 60 seconds. You tell me how it feels." He hesitated, then he lay down. I stood about 3 feet away from his mat, near his hip, and I stared. Not a creepy stare, just a steady, focused gaze. No expression, no movement, Just looking. After about 20 seconds, his jaw tightened. After 40, his hands curled into fists. At 55 seconds, he opened his eyes and said, "Okay. I get it. Stop." I stepped back. What did it feel like? He sat up slowly, like you were waiting for something. Like I was supposed to do something, but I didn't know what. Like my skin was too small. That's what those women felt, I said. Every time you stared, every time you leaned in, every time you touched someone's mat, they felt like their skin was too small, and they didn't know you. So their brains filled in the Kong Bai with the worst possibility. Because that's what brains do. They protect us. Corey looked at the floor for a long time. Then he said, "I don't want to be that person." "Then don't be," I said. It's that simple and that hard. The second session, we worked on gaze management. I taught him the yogic concept of drishti, a focused gaze, usually on a fixed point like your own thumb or a spot on the floor. I explained that keeping your eyes on your own mat isn't a punishment. It's a practice. It's a way of turning inward instead of outward. I had him practice holding eye contact with me for increasing intervals, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then looking away. I taught him the triangle method. Eyes on your own mat, eyes on the instructor, eyes on a neutral spot on the wall. Never eyes on another student's body. Never following movement, never lingering. He was terrible at first. He'd look at me, then his gaze would slide to my chest, then he'd panic and look at the ceiling, then he'd apologize, then he'd start over. But by the end of the hour, he could hold eye contact with me for a full 15 seconds without flinching. It was a small win. I celebrated it like he'd just done a handstand. The third session was yesterday. This one was harder. We talked about consent, not sexual consent, though that's important, but physical consent in shared spaces. I explained that in a yoga class, the default assumption is that no one wants to be touched, adjusted, or approached. That hands-on adjustments are offered only by the instructor, and only after verbal permission is given at the start of class. I explained that reaching toward someone, even without touching them, is a violation of their bubble. I used a hula hoop to demonstrate. I had Corey stand inside the hula hoop and said, "This is your personal space. No one enters without permission." Then I had him stand outside my hula hoop and said, "This is mine. You don't cross it unless I invite you." He asked a question that broke my heart. He said, "What if no one ever invites me in?" I didn't have a good answer for that. I said, "Then you wait. And you work on yourself. And eventually, someone will. But if you push your way in before you're invited, you'll guarantee that no one ever will." He nodded slowly. I could see him filing that away in some internal cabinet labeled, "Rules for Being Human." After the session, I called Linda. I told her the truth. Corey was trying. He was showing up. He was asking good questions. But he needed more than 4 sessions. He needed a social skills group, maybe occupational therapy, definitely a better fit with a therapist who specialized in neurodivergent young adults. I gave her the names of 3 providers in Asheville. She thanked me. She sounded different, softer, less defensive. She said, "I've been doing everything wrong, haven't I?" I said, "You've been doing what you thought was right. That's not the same as wrong. But it's also not the same as effective." She didn't argue. Now for the part I'm still entangling. The Facebook posts haven't stopped. Linda tried to take them down, but once something is out there, it's out there. People have screenshots. People have opinions. A local news blogger reached out to me for comment, and I declined. I've lost about 12 members since this started, some because they believed the online narrative, some because they just didn't want to be near the drama. But I've also gained 8 new members. People who read the posts and then came to take a class to see for themselves. Most of them stayed. One woman, a trauma therapist named Dr. Sonia 44F, signed up for a yearly membership after her first class and said, "I read the reviews. Then I read between the lines. You're not the villain here. I'm not the villain, but I'm not the hero either. I'm just a person who made a series of choices, some good, some not, some too late, and now I'm living with the consequences." Corey has his 4th private session tomorrow. If it goes well, I told him he can attend a group class on Friday morning. My quietest class, mostly retirees. Harriet will be there, the 79-year-old who told me I did the right thing. I've already warned her about Corey's presence. She said, "I've survived 3 husbands and a stroke. I'm not scared of an awkward teenager. Bring him on." I haven't told Elena. I don't even know if Elena is still in Asheville. She never came back after that Tuesday class. I've thought about reaching out, but what would I say? "Hey, the guy who made you feel unsafe is coming back to the studio, but don't worry, I taught him not to stare." That feels wrong. That feels like I'm prioritizing Corey's growth over Alina's safety. And maybe I am, I don't know. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Dr. Rivera, my therapist, said something in our last session that I've been turning over like a stone. She said, Brooke, you cannot hold everyone. You cannot be the perfect safe container for every single person who walks through your door. Sometimes you have to choose who to hold, and that choice will hurt someone. The question isn't whether you'll hurt someone. The question is whether you can live with who you chose. I don't know if I can live with this. But I'm trying. Linda called me this afternoon. Not about Corey, about herself. She said, I started seeing a therapist. A real one. Not just Dr. Benson, who lets Corey sit in silence. I'm seeing a woman named Karen in West Asheville. She's been asking me hard questions about why I isolated Corey. About my own anxiety. About my divorce from Corey's dad when Corey was 7. I didn't realize how much of my own fear I had wrapped up in him. I told her I was proud of her. And I meant it. Then she said something that made me put my coffee down. She said, Corey told me about the hula hoop thing. He told me you said no one will invite him in if he pushes. And I realized that's what I've been doing my whole life. Pushing. Not physically, but emotionally. Pushing people to accommodate us. Pushing you to let him stay when you asked him to leave. Pushing against every boundary like it was an attack instead of a gift. She paused. I'm sorry, Brooke. I'm sorry for the reviews. I'm sorry for the Facebook posts. I'm sorry for calling you ableist. You weren't. I was scared. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I accepted her apology. What else was I supposed to do? Hold a grudge forever? I don't have the energy. The 1-star reviews are still up. I could ask her to take them down, but at this point, I don't know if it matters. The people who matter have already found me. The people who don't matter were never going to come to my studio anyway. Corey's 4th session is tomorrow at 2 p.m. I've planned a practice for him that involves moving through a full sequence while I play the role of other students. I'll put down 3 other mats in the room, empty, just props, and I'll ask him to navigate the space without looking at them. Without drifting toward them, without adjusting his practice to mirror theirs. Just him, his breath, his drishti, and the empty room. If he can do that for 45 minutes, he can come to Harriet's class on Friday. If he can't, we try again. I'm not sure I'm qualified for any of this. I'm a yoga teacher. I own a small studio. I have a 200-hour certification from a weekend training in Boone, North Carolina. I am not a social worker. I am not an occupational therapist. I am not a behavioral specialist. But I am the person who is here, right now, with this kid who doesn't know where to look, and this mother who's finally admitting she's scared, and this community that's watching to see what kind of person I am. So I'm going to show up tomorrow. I'm going to set up the hula hoop and the empty mats. I'm going to remind Corey that his worth is not determined by his awkwardness. I'm going to remind myself that my worth is not determined by online reviews. And then I'm going to teach a damn yoga class, because that's what I know how to do. One more thing before I go. Harriet stopped by the studio this evening. She brought me a plant, a little succulent in a handmade pot. She said, I've been thinking about you. About all of this, and I want you to know something. When I was 32, I kicked my own son out of my house. He was using drugs. He was stealing from me. He was dangerous. I loved him more than anything, but I locked the door and told him he couldn't come back until he got help. People told me I was a monster. A mother doesn't abandon her child. But I knew that if I let him stay, I was teaching him that there were no consequences. And that would have killed him faster than any street drug. She set the succulent on the front desk. He's 47 now. He's been clean for 15 years. He has a wife and 2 kids and a job he doesn't hate. And he thanks me, every single year on his birthday, for locking that door. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it hurt enough to make him change. I started crying, not pretty crying, ugly crying, with snot and hiccups. Harriet patted my arm and said, You didn't lock the door on Corey. You opened it a crack. That's more than most people would do. Now it's up to him to walk through. So that's where I am. 18 days later, 7 1-star reviews, 12 lost members, 8 new ones, 1 teenager who doesn't know where to look, 1 mother who's finally looking at herself, 1 79-year-old woman with a succulent and a story about locking doors. I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing now. But I'm still here. The salt lamps are still glowing. The sign still says, Leave your ego at the door. And tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'm going to teach a 19-year-old kid how to be in a room without making anyone's skin feel too small. That's the update. I'll come back after Friday's class, if Corey makes it that far. Or if he doesn't, either way, I'll tell you. Final update. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and I'm writing this from the front desk of Hummingbird Heart Yoga on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The studio is quiet. A woman named Cheryl is in the back corner doing her own practice. She has a standing arrangement with me to use the space during off hours because she has agoraphobia and can't handle crowded classes. The rain is hitting the windows in that soft, persistent way that makes Asheville feel like a poem. Gus the succulent, Harriet's gift, is thriving on the windowsill. And I just finished my last scheduled session with Corey. He's not coming back for more privates. Not because it went badly. Because he doesn't need them anymore. I need to tell you how we got here. When I left off, Corey had completed 3 of his 4 private sessions and was preparing for the 4th, which I designed as a simulation of a group class using empty mats. That session happened, and it was not what I expected. Corey showed up early again, 10 minutes early, and he'd brought a notebook. A spiral-bound notebook with a black and red cover, the kind you buy at a drugstore for 99 cents. He'd written down questions, actual questions, on paper. I almost cried when I saw it. He sat down on his mat, crossed his legs, opened the notebook, and said, "I wrote down 3 things I still don't understand. Can I ask them before we do the mat thing?" I said yes. He looked at his notebook. Number 1. How do I know if someone is looking at me because they're interested or because they're scared? Like, if I'm not staring, but I glance at someone and they glance back, how do I tell the difference? I took a breath. This was not a small question. This was a question about theory of mind, about reading social cues, about the fundamental human struggle of understanding what's happening inside another person's head. I said, "Corey, that's a hard question. Adults with decades of social experience get that wrong all the time. But here's a rule of thumb. If you have to ask yourself, is she scared? Then assume yes. Assume she's scared, assume she's uncomfortable, and give her space, because if she's actually interested, she'll find another way to show you. She'll smile, she'll say hello, she'll position herself near you. But if you misread interest as fear, you're just being cautious. If you misread fear as interest, you're being dangerous." He wrote that down. He actually wrote it down. Then he said, "Number 2. What do I do if I accidentally look at someone's body? Like, not on purpose. Just because my eyes go there without me telling them to. Do I apologize? Do I pretend it didn't happen? What's the protocol?" I appreciated the word, protocol. It told me he was thinking of this as a system, not a moral failing. I said, "You look away immediately. You don't apologize out loud because that draws more attention to it. You just redirect your gaze to your own mat, or the wall, or the ceiling. And then you don't do it again. One accidental glance is human. A second glance is a choice." He nodded. He wrote something else. Then he said, "Number 3. Am I allowed to ever be in a yoga class with women? Like, ever? Or should I just do men's classes or online videos forever?" That question broke something in me. Not in a bad way. In a way that clarified. He wasn't asking for permission to be creepy. He was asking if he was permanently exiled from an entire category of human experience because of the way his brain worked. I put my hand on my heart and said, "Corey, you are allowed to be in rooms with women. You are allowed to take yoga classes with women. You are allowed to exist in public spaces where women exist. The question is not whether you're allowed. The question is whether you can do it without making them feel unsafe. And I think you can. I think you're proving that you can. But it's going to take practice. And you're going to mess up sometimes. And when you mess up, you're going to apologize and do better. That's all any of us can do." He closed his notebook. He said, "Okay, I'm ready for the mat thing." We did the simulation. I laid out 4 empty mats in a semicircle. I asked Corey to move through a 20-minute sequence, sun salutations, standing poses, a few seated forward folds, while treating the empty mats as if they were occupied by real people. He had to navigate the space without stepping on the imaginary boundaries, without looking at the imaginary people, without drifting closer to them. I watched from the front of the room. He was awkward. His transitions were clunky. He looked at the floor, the wall, his own hands. But he didn't look at the empty mats. He didn't drift. He kept his drishti on his own thumb during Warrior 2. And when he finished, he looked at me with this expression I can only describe as fragile hope. "How was that?" he asked. I said, "That was a really good start." He smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Not the flat, unblinking smile from before. A real one. It changed his whole face. The next day was Friday. Harriet's quiet morning class. 8 people, average age 62. I'd warned Harriet, and I'd warned the others, Not in detail, but enough. I have a young man joining us today who's working on some social challenges. He's been in private sessions with me. I'm asking you to trust my judgment. If anyone feels uncomfortable at any point, please raise your hand and I'll address it immediately. No one raised a hand. Harriet winked at me. Corey arrived 15 minutes early. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt and dark shorts. No video game logos. He'd showered. He'd brushed his hair. He looked like a different person. He unrolled his mat in the back corner, the same spot from his very first class, near the window. He sat down. He didn't look at anyone. He kept his eyes on his own hands. The class was 75 minutes. I taught a gentle flow with lots of verbal cues and minimal walking around. I didn't offer hands-on adjustments to anyone, because I wanted to remove that variable entirely. I watched Corey like a hawk, but I tried to be subtle about it. For the first 30 minutes, he was perfect. Eyes on his mat or on me. No staring, no drifting, no sounds. He wobbled in half moon, but everyone wobbles in half moon. Then, around minute 40, something happened. We were in a supine twist again. Eyes closed, hands resting on the floor. I was at the front of the room, leading the class through breath cues. I opened my eyes and scanned the room. Corey's eyes were open. He wasn't twisting. He was lying on his back, head turned slightly to the left, looking at the woman on the mat next to him. Her name is Elaine 68F. She's a retired librarian with silver hair and arthritis in her hips. She wears loose-fitting cotton pants and a t-shirt that says, "I'd rather be reading." She had her eyes closed. She didn't know she was being watched. My heart dropped. I didn't stop the class. I didn't call him out. I walked over to his mat, knelt down beside him, and said very quietly, "Corey." Eyes on the ceiling. Remember the protocol? He blinked. He turned his head. He looked at the ceiling. And he stayed there for the rest of the twist. After class, I asked him to stay. The other students filed out. Harriet paused at the door and gave me a look that said, "I trust you." Elaine patted my shoulder and said, "Lovely class, dear." Then it was just me and Corey in the empty room. I sat down on the mat across from him. I said, "Tell me what happened." He was already crying, silent tears running down his cheeks. He said, "I didn't mean to." I opened my eyes and I just looked. It wasn't even a second. Maybe 2 seconds. And then you came over and I stopped. But I already did it. I already messed up. I said, "Corey, you opened your eyes during a closed eye posture and you looked at another student. That's a violation of the agreement we made. You know that." He nodded. He wiped his face with his sleeve. "But," I said, "you stopped when I asked you to. You didn't argue. You didn't make an excuse. You corrected the behavior immediately. That's not nothing. That's actually everything." He looked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "So, I'm not banned?" I took a long breath. This was the moment where I had to decide what kind of teacher I was going to be. The kind who enforces zero-tolerance policies no matter what, or the kind who believes in redemption and repair and the messy, nonlinear process of becoming better. I said, "You're not banned. But you're on probation. One more violation, one more glance, one more drift, one more anything, and you're out. Not because I don't believe in you. Because I have to believe in the safety of every other person in this room more. Do you understand?" He said, "I understand." I said, "Then I'll see you next Friday." He came back, and the Friday after that, and the Friday after that. He's been to 7 Friday morning classes now. He hasn't had another violation. He's stopped sitting in the back corner. He's moved to the middle of the room, which terrified me at first, but he's earned it. He makes small talk with Harriet now. Harriet told me last week, he's a sweet kid. Just needs a little polish. Elaine brought him a book, a sci-fi novel about space exploration, because he mentioned he liked reading. He showed up the next Friday with the book tucked under his arm and a shy smile. I'm not saying everything is fixed. Corey still struggles. He still holds eye contact too long sometimes. He still stands too close to people in the lobby. Linda told me he got asked to leave a coffee shop last week because he was staring at a barista. He called me afterward, not Linda, me, and said, "I did it again. I didn't mean to, but I did it." We talked for 20 minutes about triggers and resets and how public spaces are different from the studio. He said, "I wish I could just carry you around in my pocket." I laughed and said, "You can carry the rules in your pocket." That's the same thing. The Facebook posts have finally died down. Linda made a public post last week, without asking me, which was a bold choice, saying that she had misrepresented the situation, and that Hummingbird Heart Yoga had gone above and beyond to support her son. She didn't apologize directly for calling me ableist, but she came close. The comments were mixed. Some people said they were glad she finally saw the truth. Others accused her of being pressured into retracting. You can't win on the internet. I've stopped trying. I've gained back most of the members I lost, plus a few more. The studio is fuller now than it was before all of this started. I don't think that's because of the drama. I think it's because people talk, and word got around that I didn't just kick Corey out and forget about him. I stayed, I taught, I held the line and offered a hand at the same time. That matters to people, apparently. But here's the part one haven't told anyone yet. A week ago, Elena came back. I was teaching a 6 p.m. all levels flow. The room was full, 18 people, which is near capacity for my space. I was setting up my own mat at the front when I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway. Elena, 26 years old, glasses, the tremor in her hands that she told me came from anxiety. She looked thinner than I remembered, and tired, and scared. She had her mat rolled under her arm. I walked over to her. I said, Elena, hi, I didn't know you were coming. She said, I almost didn't. I've been driving past the studio for weeks. Just driving past, parking across the street, sitting in my car, then driving home. I said, that sounds really hard. She nodded. I wanted to come back, but I was scared he'd be here. I read the Facebook posts. I saw that you let him come back. And I was so angry at you, Brooke. I was so angry. I thought you chose him over me. My throat closed up. I said, Elena, I didn't choose anyone over anyone. I tried to hold everyone. I probably failed at that. But I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped hoping you'd come back. She looked past me, into the studio. Is he here tonight? No, I said. Corey only comes to Friday mornings. He's not in any evening classes. She was quiet for a long time. Then she unrolled her mat. She placed it in the front row, near the altar, the same spot she'd used before. She sat down. She took off her glasses and cleaned them on her shirt. Then she looked up at me and said, I'm going to try. I taught that class like my life depended on it. Every cue was intentional. Every pause was a prayer. I watched Elena the whole time. She cried during the first forward fold, silent tears, the kind that leak out whether you want them to or not. She didn't wipe them away. She just let them fall. By the time we got to Savasana, she was still. Her hands were flat on the floor. Her breathing was slow. After class, she came up to the front desk. She said, I'm not ready to be his friend. I'm not ready to be in a room with him. But I'm ready to be in a room with you. Is that okay? I said, that's more than okay. That's everything. She signed up for a 6-month membership that night. I told Corey about Elena's return during our last private session. Not the details, just that she was back, and that she wasn't ready to share space with him yet. He took it better than I expected. He said, I don't blame her. I wouldn't want to be in a room with me either. I told him that was a very mature thing to say. He shrugged. I'm trying. His last private session with me was this morning. We didn't do yoga. We sat on the mats, side by side, facing the windows. The rain was coming down. I made us tea, chamomile for him, ginger for me. He had his notebook. He didn't open it. He said, I think I'm ready to not need you anymore. I almost choked on my tea. That's a very direct thing to say. He smiled. That real smile again. I don't mean it like that. I mean I think I have the rules now. I have the notebook. I have the protocols. I have Dr. Benson. Well, I have a new Dr. Benson. My mom found a different therapist. A guy named Marcus who actually talks to me. He doesn't just sit there. He gives me homework. Like, actual homework. Last week he told me to go to a grocery store and stand in the checkout line for 10 minutes without looking at anyone's body. I did it. It was horrible, but I did it. I said, Corey, that's huge. That's genuinely huge. He looked at his hands. I still mess up. I messed up at the grocery store. I looked at a woman's legs for like 3 seconds. But I caught myself. I looked at the candy rack instead. And then I bought a Snickers. Marcus said that's called redirecting and rewarding. I laughed. Marcus sounds like a good therapist. He's okay, Corey said. He doesn't have a yoga studio, though. We sat in silence for a minute. The rain on the windows. The faint smell of lavender from the diffuser. Then Corey said, I want to keep coming to Friday classes. But I don't need the privates anymore. I think I have to do this on my own now. That's what Marcus said. He said, eventually the training wheels have to come off. I felt a lump in my throat. I said, I think Marcus is right. But I want you to know something. My door is always open. If you have a bad week. If you slip. If you just need to sit in a quiet room and remember what we talked about. You come here. You don't even have to tell me why. You can just sit in the lobby and drink the terrible tea I make. Okay? He nodded. Then he stood up. He rolled his mat. He put it in his bag. He walked to the door. And then he turned around and said, "Thank you, Brooke, for not giving up on me. My mom gave up on teaching me. She just hid me instead. You didn't hide me. You showed me the map." And then he left. I sat on that mat for another 20 minutes, just staring at the door. I thought about Elena, who drove past the studio for weeks before she could come inside. I thought about Linda, who's in therapy now, learning to separate her own fear from her son's life. I thought about Harriet, and her succulent, and the son she locked out of her house so he wouldn't die. I thought about Dr. Rivera, who told me I couldn't hold everyone. I thought about all the people who called me ableist and all the people who sent me angry DMs and all the people who left one-star reviews without ever stepping foot in my studio. And I thought about Corey, 19 years old, messy brown hair, acne, a notebook full of questions, a boy who didn't know where to look, who now knows that the answer is at your own mat, at the wall, at the ceiling, anywhere but another person's body without permission. I don't know what happens next. Maybe Corey will slip, maybe he'll stare again, and someone will complain, and I'll have to make another impossible choice. Maybe Elena and Corey will eventually end up in the same class, and it will be awkward and painful and they'll both have to navigate that room together. Maybe Linda will relapse into defensiveness. Maybe the Facebook posts will start up again. Or maybe none of that will happen. Maybe Corey will keep going to Friday classes and buying Snickers at the grocery store and seeing Marcus and slowly learning how to be a person in a world that wasn't built for his brain. Maybe Elena will keep coming to evening classes and find a little bit of her safety back. Maybe the two of them will never meet, and that will be okay, because not every story needs a reconciliation scene. I'm done trying to control the ending. I'm a yoga teacher. My job is to show up, hold the space, and trust that the people who need to be there will find their way to their mats. That's what I did for Corey. That's what I did for Elena. That's what I'll do for whoever walks through that door tomorrow. The rain has stopped now. Cheryl finished her practice and let herself out 20 minutes ago. The studio is empty except for me and Gus the succulent and the salt lamps and the sign that says, "Leave your ego at the door." I'm going to lock up in a minute. I'm going to drive home to my little apartment in West Asheville, the one with the creaky floors and the neighbor who plays the banjo at odd hours. I'm going to eat leftover pasta and watch something stupid on Netflix. And then I'm going to wake up tomorrow and do it all over again. That's the final update. Not a happily ever after. Not a tragedy. Just a Tuesday. Just a studio. Just a woman who tried her best and will keep trying, even when her best isn't good enough, because that's what we do. We try. We fail. We learn. We try again. Story 3. AITA for not being happy at becoming an uncle? My name's Daniel, I'm 29, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. I've got a pretty normal life. I work a decent job in IT, I rent a small apartment, I've got a couple close friends I see on weekends, and my relationship with my family has always been fine. Not amazing, not terrible. Just fine. My older sister, Lauren, has always been the golden child. She's 34, married to this guy named Kevin, and up until recently, they were the perfect couple. Nice house in the suburbs, stable jobs, always hosting holidays, that kind of thing. If you asked anyone in my family who was doing life right, they'd point to Lauren. So when she announced she was pregnant a few months ago, everyone lost their minds in the best way. My parents cried. My mom immediately started knitting baby clothes. My dad started talking about finally being a grandpa, like it was the greatest promotion of his life. Even my cousins, who I barely hear from, started texting the family group chat nonstop. And me? I just didn't feel anything. At first I thought maybe it just hadn't sunk in yet. Like, okay, cool, there's going to be a baby. That's nice, but everyone else was acting like this was the biggest, most life-changing event in the history of our family, and I was sitting there thinking about whether I'd left my laundry in the washer. I faked it, obviously. I hugged Lauren, told her congratulations, told Kevin he was going to be a great dad. I smiled for pictures. I even went along with the jokes about how I'd be the fun uncle. But inside, I felt completely disconnected from it. I kept telling myself, maybe it'll feel real later. It didn't. Over the next few weeks, the baby became the center of everything. Every conversation somehow circled back to it. Family dinners, baby names, phone calls, baby updates, group chat, ultrasound pictures, nursery ideas, debates over strollers. My mom started referring to the baby as our little miracle. And I started dreading seeing my family. It wasn't just that I didn't care as much as they did. It was that I actively felt annoyed. And I hate that about myself. I really do. The tipping point was the gender reveal party. Lauren and Kevin decided to go all out. They rented this big backyard space, invited a ton of people, had decorations everywhere, pink and blue balloons, banners, a whole setup. It felt like a mini wedding, honestly. I almost didn't go. I told myself I had work, that I was tired, that it wasn't a big deal if I skipped it. But my mom called me the night before and said, it would really mean a lot to your sister if you were there. So I went. The whole thing felt surreal. Everyone was so excited, like they were waiting for the outcome of some huge, life-altering event. People were placing bets on whether it would be a boy or a girl. Lauren was glowing, Kevin was grinning like he'd just won the lottery, and I was standing there holding a drink, wondering why I felt like I didn't belong. Then came the big moment. They did the whole countdown thing, and Kevin popped this balloon filled with colored powder. It was blue. Everyone erupted, screaming, cheering, hugging. My mom started crying again. My dad was laughing and clapping Kevin on the back. Lauren looked like she was about to burst with happiness. And I just stood there. I clapped, sure, I smiled, but inside, I felt this weird heaviness, like I was watching something I was supposed to care about but just didn't. That's when my cousin Rachel came up to me and said, "You don't look very excited." I laughed it off at first, said something like, "Oh, I am, just tired." But she kept looking at me, like she didn't buy it. "Seriously," she said, lowering her voice, "you okay?" And for some reason, I just told the truth. I said, "I don't know. I just don't feel anything about it." She looked at me like I just said something completely insane. "What do you mean you don't feel anything? You're going to be an uncle." "I know," I said. "I just don't think it's that big of a deal." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. She didn't make a scene or anything, but her whole demeanor changed. She gave me this tight smile and said, "Wow. Okay," and then walked away. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured maybe she thought I was being weird, but whatever. But of course, it didn't stay between us. A couple days later, my mom called me. And I could tell from her tone right away that something was off. "Daniel," she said, "is everything okay with you?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "Well," she hesitated, "Rachel mentioned that you seemed upset at the gender reveal." I sighed. I wasn't upset. I just wasn't, freaking out about it. There was a pause. Then she said, "Your sister is really excited, honey. This is a big moment for her." "I know," I said. "And I'm happy for her. I just don't feel the same way everyone else does." Another pause, longer this time. "Can I be honest with you?" My mom said. "Sure." "It comes across as cold." That hit harder than I expected. I tried to explain. I said it's not that I don't care about Lauren, or that I don't want her to be happy. It's just that I don't feel personally invested in the idea of a baby. I've never been a kid person. I don't have any desire to have children myself. To me, this isn't some life-changing event, it's just something that's happening to someone else. But the more I talked, the worse it sounded. My mom said, "You don't have to want kids to be happy for your sister." "I am happy for her," I insisted. "I just don't think it's this huge deal." She sighed. "It is a huge deal, Daniel. And it would mean a lot if you could at least try to show that." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time thinking about it. Am I actually being cold? Or is everyone else just overreacting? Because from my perspective, nothing about my life is changing. I'm not the one having a kid. I'm not responsible for it. I'll see it occasionally at family gatherings, sure, but it's not like I'm suddenly becoming a parent. But then I started thinking about how everyone else sees it. To my parents, this is their first grandchild. To Lauren, this is probably the biggest moment of her life. To the rest of my family, it's this exciting new chapter. And then there's me, standing off to the side, feeling like it's just another day. Things got worse when Lauren herself brought it up. We met for coffee last week, just the two of us. At first it was normal. We talked about work, about random stuff, and then she got this look on her face like she was trying to figure out how to say something. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah, of course. Are you happy about the baby?" I hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. She looked down at her cup. "Rachel told me what you said." "Of course she did," I muttered. Lauren sighed. "I'm not mad, I just don't understand." I tried to explain it the same way I explained it to my mom. That I'm happy she's happy, but I don't personally feel excited about becoming an uncle. She listened, but I could tell it wasn't landing the way I wanted. "It just kind of hurts," she said quietly. "I thought you'd be more involved, I guess." Involved how? I asked. I don't know. Asking about the baby. Being excited. Acting like it matters to you. It does matter to me, I said. Just not in the same way it matters to you. She shook her head. That sounds like you're just saying it because you think you're supposed to. And honestly, maybe she's right. Because if I'm being completely honest, I don't feel a connection to this baby at all. It doesn't feel real to me. It feels like everyone's projecting all this meaning onto something that hasn't even happened yet. But I can also see that my reaction, or lack of one, is hurting people I care about. So now I'm stuck. Do I fake enthusiasm for something I don't genuinely feel, just to keep the peace? Do I keep being honest and risk coming across like some kind of emotionless jerk? Is there a middle ground I'm missing? I don't hate the idea of being an uncle. I just don't feel anything about it right now. Maybe that'll change when the baby is actually here. Maybe it won't. All I know is that right now, everyone expects me to feel something I don't, and I don't know if that makes me a bad person or just different. And I honestly don't know what I'm supposed to do about it. Update. I didn't expect things to escalate the way they did, honestly. After that conversation with Lauren at the coffee shop, I figured things would just stay a little awkward for a while and then eventually settle down. That's usually how stuff goes in my family: tension, then avoidance, then everyone pretends it never happened. That's not what happened this time. For a couple weeks, things were quiet. No one brought it up again. The group chat was still active with baby stuff, and I kept doing what I'd been doing. Reacting with a thumbs up here, that's nice, there. Trying to at least not come off as completely indifferent. I thought maybe that was enough. Then my mom invited me over for dinner one Sunday. She said it was just going to be her, my dad, Lauren, and Kevin. Nothing unusual. We've done that 100 times. I almost didn't go again, but I told myself avoiding it would just make things worse. At first, it was normal. My mom made way too much food like always. My dad was talking about some home improvement project he's never going to finish. Kevin was going on about work. Lauren was quieter than usual, but I figured that was just because she was tired. About halfway through dinner, my mom brought up the baby shower. She's planning it, of course. Apparently it's going to be a big thing: venue, games, decorations, the whole deal. She started talking about dates and who's invited, and then she said, "Daniel, we'll need your help that day." I looked up. Help with what? Setting things up, making sure everything runs smoothly, she said. And we thought maybe you could say a few words. You know, as the uncle. I actually laughed a little because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. A speech? I said. I don't think that's really my thing. My mom frowned. It doesn't have to be anything big. Just something nice. I don't even know what I'd say, I said. I'm not exactly the right person for that. That's when Lauren finally spoke up. You could start by pretending you care, she said. The whole table went quiet. I felt my face get hot immediately. That's not fair, isn't it? She said, looking straight at me. Because that's what it feels like. Like you're just pretending your way through all of this. I've been trying, I said. What do you want me to do, exactly? I want you to act like this matters, she said. Like this baby is actually important to you. It is important, I said, probably a little too defensively. Then why do you act like it's a chore every time it comes up? She shot back. I didn't have a good answer for that. Kevin tried to jump in and calm things down. He said something like, "Hey, it's okay. Everyone processes things differently," but by that point, the damage was already done. My mom looked upset, my dad was staring at his plate like he wanted to disappear, and Lauren looked like she was trying not to cry. I said, "Look, I don't know what you want from me. I'm not going to suddenly become this super excited person overnight. That's just not who I am." Lauren pushed her chair back slightly. "I'm not asking you to be a different person. I'm asking you to care about your family." "I do care about my family," I said. "Then show it," she said. And that's where I messed up. Because instead of de-escalating, instead of saying something reassuring, I got frustrated and said, "Why is everything about this baby now? Like, seriously, it's all anyone talks about. It's exhausting." You could have heard a pin drop. The second I said it, I knew it was the wrong thing. But it was out there. Lauren just stared at me for a second, and then she said, really quietly, "Wow." She stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "I'm going home." Kevin followed her, giving me this look like he didn't even know what to say. My mom immediately turned to me and said, "Daniel, that was really hurtful." "I didn't mean it like that," I said, but it sounded weak even to me. "Then how did you mean it?" she asked. And again, I didn't have a good answer. I left not long after that. The whole drive home, I kept replaying it in my head, thinking about what I should have said instead. But the thing is, part of what I said was true. I do feel like everything revolves around this baby now. I do feel overwhelmed by it. But I also know I handled it terribly. The next day, Lauren texted me. It wasn't a long message. Just, I think I need some space for a while. That hit harder than I expected. We've never been super close, but we've never had space between us like that either. We've always just existed in each other's lives without much friction. I replied, I understand. I'm sorry for what I said. She didn't respond. It's been about 3 weeks since then. I haven't seen her. I haven't heard from her. My mom still talks to me, but it's different. There's this underlying disappointment in her tone that wasn't there before. My dad hasn't said much about it, but I can tell he's not thrilled either. The baby shower is coming up soon, and I found out through my mom that Lauren doesn't want me involved in planning it anymore. I'm still invited, but that's it. And here's the part that's been messing with my head the most. I think I finally felt something. Not about the baby, exactly, but about the situation. A few days ago, my mom sent me a picture. It was one of those 3D ultrasound images. You could actually kind of see the baby's face, or at least a vague version of it. Normally I would have just reacted with a quick, cool, or something and moved on. But this time, I stared at it for a while, and for the first time, it felt real. Like, that's an actual person who's going to exist. Someone who's going to grow up, have a personality, maybe look up to me someday as their uncle. And then right after that thought, I realized that by the time that happens, there's a chance my relationship with Lauren is already damaged. Not permanently, maybe, but enough that things won't be the same. And that bothered me more than anything. I don't suddenly feel over-the-moon excitement about becoming an uncle. I'm still not that person. But I think I finally understand why everyone else cares so much. It's not just about the baby. It's about what the baby represents to them. And I've been acting like that doesn't matter. So now I'm stuck again, but in a different way. I want to fix things with Lauren. I do, but I don't know how to do that without feeling like I'm being fake. I don't want to show up and suddenly act like I'm the world's most excited uncle, because that's not real. But I also don't want to keep hurting her by being so detached. I've thought about reaching out again, maybe asking to meet up and talk. But part of me worries she'll just shut it down. I've also thought about writing her a message explaining everything more clearly, but I don't know if that'll just make things worse. All I know is that now, for the first time, I actually care about how this is affecting us. And I don't know if I'm too late to do anything about it. Update. A lot has happened since I last wrote, and I've gone back and forth on whether I even deserved to write an update at all. But things didn't just sit in that awkward, unresolved space forever. Eventually, something had to give. The baby shower came first. I debated not going. I really did. Part of me thought maybe giving Lauren more space was the right move, especially since she had already made it clear she didn't want me involved. But another part of me knew that not showing up at all would probably make things worse, like I was doubling down on not caring. So I went. It was at this event hall just outside Columbus, the kind of place people use for weddings and big parties. When I walked in, it was already packed. Decorations everywhere, people laughing, music playing, tables full of gifts wrapped in pastel colors. My mom had clearly gone all out. I felt out of place immediately. I spotted my parents first. My mom came over and hugged me, but it was one of those hugs that felt a little too quick, a little too careful. My dad just nodded at me and asked how work was. Normal words, but there was still that tension underneath. Then I saw Lauren. She was across the room, sitting in this decorated chair like some kind of centerpiece while people took turns talking to her. She looked happy, genuinely happy, and also, different, not just because she was pregnant, but because she seemed completely absorbed in this new version of her life. For a second, I almost turned around and left. But I didn't. I stayed near the edges at first, talking to a couple cousins, pretending to be more interested in the snack table than I actually was. I kept glancing over at Lauren, trying to figure out the right moment to approach her, but every time I thought about it, I felt this knot in my stomach. Eventually, she saw me. We made eye contact from across the room, and for a second neither of us moved. Then she gave me a small, polite smile. Not warm, not cold. Just neutral. I walked over. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she replied. There was a pause. People around us were talking, laughing, completely unaware of how awkward it felt standing there. "You look good," I said, which felt like the safest possible thing. "Thanks," she said. "You made it." "Yeah, of course I did." Another pause. I could tell this wasn't going anywhere on its own, so I just said it. "Can we talk for a minute? Somewhere quieter?" She hesitated, then nodded. We stepped outside to this small patio area behind the hall. It was quieter, just a few people standing around, but far enough that we could actually talk. For a second, I didn't know how to start. Everything I had rehearsed in my head suddenly felt stupid. "I'm sorry," I said finally. She didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. "For what?" she asked. "For what I said at dinner. And, honestly, for how I've been acting in general." She crossed her arms slightly. "Okay, I meant it when I said I'm happy for you," I continued. "I just haven't been good at showing it. And I think I've been kind of dismissive without realizing how much it was affecting you." She let out a small breath. "It wasn't just dismissive, Daniel. It felt like you didn't care at all." "I know," I said. "And I get why it came across that way." I told her about the ultrasound picture. About how it was the first time it actually felt real to me. About how I realized I might be damaging our relationship over something I didn't even fully understand yet. "I'm not suddenly a baby person," I said. "I don't think I ever will be. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. Or that I won't care about him." That was the first time I'd actually said him out loud in a way that felt intentional. Lauren's expression softened a little. "I wasn't expecting you to be over the top excited," she said. "I just wanted you to be there with me. This is a big deal for me, and it felt like you were just above it." "I wasn't trying to be above it," I said. "I think I just didn't know how to connect to it." She nodded slowly, like she was considering that. "I can't promise I'll be the kind of uncle who's obsessed with baby stuff," I added. "But I can promise I'll try. And I can promise I won't act like it's all a burden anymore." There was a long pause after that. Then she said, "That's all I wanted." And just like that, some of the tension I'd been carrying around for weeks finally eased. We didn't hug or have some big emotional moment. It wasn't like a movie. But we stood there and talked for a while, about normal things, about how she's been feeling, about how nervous she is even though she's excited. Before we went back inside, she said, "You don't have to give a speech, by the way." I laughed a little. "Thank God. But," she added, "maybe don't hide by the snack table the whole time." Deal. The rest of the baby shower wasn't suddenly amazing or anything, but it was better. I actually paid attention. I helped carry some gifts, talked to people, even asked Lauren a couple questions about how she was doing instead of avoiding the topic. It still didn't feel natural, but it felt like a step. After that, things gradually improved. We didn't instantly go back to how things were before, but the distance between us started to close. We texted a bit more. I even went with her and Kevin one weekend to look at baby furniture, which is something I never would have done a month earlier. And then, about 2 months later, the baby was born. Kevin called me early in the morning. I almost didn't pick up because I thought it was a spam call, but I'm glad I did. "It's time," he said, sounding equal parts excited and terrified. I went to the hospital later that day. Sitting in that waiting room felt weirdly similar to the gender reveal. Like I was on the outside of something big, but this time, I didn't feel as disconnected. After a few hours, Kevin came out and said, "You want to meet him?" And I said yes without really thinking about it. Walking into that hospital room is something I don't think I'll forget. Lauren looked exhausted, but happy in a way I'd never seen before. And in her arms was this tiny, red-faced, squirming human being that somehow already felt like he belonged there. "This is Ethan," she said. I stepped closer, a little unsure of what I was supposed to do. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked. Every instinct in me said no. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid I'd do it wrong. But I said yes anyway. Kevin showed me how to hold him, and suddenly I had this tiny person in my arms who weighed almost nothing and everything at the same time. And I felt it, not some overwhelming, life-changing wave of emotion like people always describe. But something real, a kind of quiet awareness that this is my nephew. That he's going to grow up knowing me, whether I'm ready for that or not. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I looked at Lauren and said, "He's actually pretty great." She laughed, tired but genuine. "Wow, high praise coming from you." "I'm serious," I said. "You did good." She smiled at me in a way that felt like things were okay again. It's been a few weeks since then. I'm not a completely different person. I'm still not the guy who's going to obsess over every little baby milestone or spend hours talking about diapers. But I show up more. I ask questions. I visit. And it turns out, you don't have to feel everything all at once for it to matter. Sometimes it just takes a little longer to get there. Story 4. WIBTA for telling my client that I used to date her husband? I work as a freelance interior designer based in Seattle, and for the most part, My job is exactly what I always wanted: creative, flexible, and personal. I get to help people shape the spaces they live in, and sometimes that means getting to know them a little more closely than you would in most professions. You're in their homes, hearing about their routines, their preferences, their relationships. Most clients stay just that, clients. Except this one didn't. Her name is Melissa, early 30s. She found me through a referral, and from the first consultation, it felt like a really good fit. She was easy to talk to, trusted my ideas, and wasn't afraid to invest in making the place feel right. From a professional standpoint, she was kind of a dream client. The problem started the day I met her husband. His name is Andrew, and the second he walked into the room, I felt like all the air just dropped out of my lungs for a second. Because I knew him, not in a vague, "we've met before" kind of way. We dated, not recently. It was about 6 years ago, back when I was still living in Portland. It wasn't a long relationship, maybe 4 months total, but it was intense in that way short relationships sometimes are. A lot of late nights, a lot of talking about big life plans, a lot of chemistry that burned out faster than either of us expected. It didn't end dramatically, no cheating, no huge fight. Just one of those quiet dissolves where you both realize it's not going anywhere long term. We stopped talking, moved on, and that was that. Or at least, that's what I thought. Standing there in Melissa's half-furnished living room, seeing Andrew again after all that time, was surreal. He recognized me immediately. I could tell by the way his expression froze for half a second before he quickly smoothed it over. "Hey," he said, casual but a little too careful. "Hi," I replied, doing my best to match that tone. Melissa, completely unaware, smiled and said, "Oh good, you guys have met?" There was a split second where I had to decide what to say. Andrew beat me to it. "Yeah, I think we crossed paths a long time ago," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, something like that." And that was it. We moved on, or at least, we pretended to. For the rest of that meeting, I was hyper-aware of everything. The way Andrew avoided looking at me directly. The way he kept his comments strictly about the house. The way Melissa casually leaned into him or touched his arm without realizing how weird that felt for me to witness. But from her perspective, everything was normal. And professionally, I kept it that way. After that day, I seriously considered backing out of the project. I even drafted an email saying I had a scheduling conflict and wouldn't be able to continue. It would have been easy, clean, no explanation needed, but I didn't send it. Partly because this was a big project, good money, good exposure, exactly the kind of work I want more of. Partly because, if I'm being honest, I didn't think a 4-month relationship from 6 years ago should have that much power over my present life. And partly because Andrew and I hadn't actually done anything wrong. We were just two people who used to know each other. So I stayed. For the next few weeks, things settled into a routine. I worked mostly with Melissa during the day, planning layouts, picking materials, discussing furniture. Andrew was usually at work, so I didn't see him often. When he was around, it was polite. We kept things surface level. Conversations about paint colors, budgets, timelines. Nothing personal, no references to the past. It was like we had an unspoken agreement to treat each other like distant acquaintances. And for a while, it worked. Until the night everything shifted. Melissa had asked me to come by in the evening to go over some final decisions about the kitchen remodel. Andrew was there too, which wasn't unusual, but this time the dynamic felt different. Maybe it was just that we'd all gotten more comfortable, or maybe it was that we'd been working together long enough that the boundaries were starting to blur a little. At one point, Melissa stepped out to take a phone call, leaving me and Andrew alone in the kitchen. There was this silence that felt heavier than it should have. Finally, he said, quietly, "This is weird, right?" I let out a small breath. "Yeah, a little." He nodded, leaning against the counter. "I didn't expect to ever run into you again. Especially like this." "Same," I said. Another pause. "I didn't tell her," he added. "I figured," I said. He looked at me then, properly this time. "Are you going to?" And there it was, the question I'd been avoiding even thinking about. "I don't know," I said honestly. He ran a hand through his hair. "I mean, it was a long time ago. It doesn't mean anything now." "I know that," I said. "But that doesn't necessarily mean she'd feel the same way." He didn't argue with that. "I just don't want this to turn into a whole thing," he said. "It's not like we did anything wrong." "That's true," I said. "But it's also her house. Her project. She might want to know." "And what, you're going to tell her?" he asked, not aggressively, but with a clear edge of concern. I said I don't know, I repeated. Before we could say anything else, Melissa came back in, cheerful and completely unaware of the tension she had just interrupted. And that was the moment things stopped feeling simple. Because now it wasn't just about whether I could professionally handle working with someone I used to date. It was about whether I had an obligation to tell her. On one hand, it feels like a non-issue. This wasn't some deep, long-term relationship. There are no lingering feelings. No unresolved drama. It's just history. On the other hand, if I were in her position, I think I'd want to know. Not because I'd assume anything inappropriate was happening, but because it changes the dynamic. It adds context. It's information that feels relevant, even if it doesn't technically affect anything. And the longer I don't say anything, the more it starts to feel like I'm actively hiding it. That feeling got worse the more comfortable Melissa and I became. She started opening up more, about her life, her marriage, her hopes for the house. At one point, she even joked about how Andrew never notices design details unless someone points them out, and I had to laugh along like I didn't already know that about him. Every time she said something like that, it felt like I was holding onto a piece of information she didn't have access to. Not a huge secret, but a secret nonetheless. Then, a couple weeks ago, something happened that made the whole thing feel a lot more immediate. Melissa and I were going through old photos of the house on her laptop, trying to figure out how much had changed over the years. At some point, she switched tabs to show me something else, and a photo popped up briefly before she clicked away. It was a picture of her and Andrew from years ago, and I recognized the timing instantly. Because it overlapped with when he and I were dating. It wasn't proof of anything definitive. People date around. Timelines can be messy, but it planted this uncomfortable question in my head that hadn't been there before. What if our timelines overlapped more than I realized? What if, from her perspective, there's more to this than just, we dated a long time ago? I haven't said anything to Andrew about that thought. I don't even know if it's fair to assume anything based on one photo. But it made me realize that the situation might not be as simple as I've been telling myself. And now I feel like I'm in this weird ethical gray area. If I tell her, I risk blowing up a situation that might not need to be blown up. It could create tension in their marriage, make her uncomfortable working with me, potentially cost me the project, and damage my professional reputation. If I don't tell her, I'm continuing to withhold something that feels relevant, especially as I get closer to her and more involved in her home. And I don't know which option is worse. Andrew clearly doesn't want me to say anything. He hasn't pushed it again, but it's obvious from that one conversation. Melissa trusts me. That's the part that's making this hardest. Because it doesn't feel great knowing that trust is built without the full picture. I keep going back and forth. One day I convince myself it's not a big deal and I should just let it go. The next day I feel like I'm being dishonest by omission. I haven't made a decision yet, but I feel like I'm getting closer to a point where I'm going to have to. And I genuinely don't know what the right move is here. Update. I didn't expect things to come to a head as quickly as they did. But I guess situations like this don't just sit quietly forever. They kind of build pressure until something gives. For me, that something was a random Tuesday afternoon that started completely normal. I was over at the house going through final fabric samples for the living room with Melissa. We'd gotten to that stage of the project where most of the big decisions were done, and it was more about fine-tuning details. It should have felt like smooth sailing, but I'd been carrying this growing sense of unease for days at that point. That photo I mentioned before, the one that made me question the timeline, had been stuck in my head. I kept trying to rationalize it, telling myself I was probably overthinking it. But every time I interacted with Andrew, I found myself watching him more closely, wondering what he hadn't said. And that made everything feel off. Melissa, meanwhile, was completely normal. Laughing, chatting, asking my opinion on throw pillows like none of this existed. Which somehow made it worse. At one point, she said something that just tipped me over the edge. We were talking about how long she and Andrew had been together, because it came up naturally while discussing how their style had evolved. She said, "We've been together almost 7 years now. It's crazy to think about." 7. I did the math in my head immediately. That overlapped. Not vaguely, not maybe, definitely. I felt this drop in my stomach that I can't really describe. It wasn't anger exactly, but it was something close to it. Not even because of what it might mean about Andrew, honestly, that's between them, but because suddenly my silence didn't feel neutral anymore. It felt like I was sitting on information that could matter in a very real way. I think she noticed something shift in my expression because she paused and said, "What?" And I just couldn't keep it in anymore. It wasn't planned. I didn't have a speech ready. It just came out. "Can I tell you something kind of awkward?" I said. She laughed a little. Now I'm nervous. Sure? I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds, and then I said it. I used to date Andrew. Years ago, before I moved to Seattle. The room went completely still. For a second, she just stared at me like she didn't process the words. Then she blinked and said, "Wait, what?" I didn't realize at first, I said quickly. Not until I met him here. And it wasn't serious, it was a short relationship, but... You dated my husband? She cut in. Yes, I said, a long time ago. There was a long silence. She sat back slowly, like she needed physical space to think. How long ago? She asked. About 6 years, I said. And you just didn't tell me? She said. There wasn't anger in her voice yet. Just disbelief. I didn't know how, I said. At first it felt irrelevant, and then the longer I didn't say anything, the harder it got to bring up. She let out a breath and looked away for a second. Okay, she said, but it didn't sound like okay. Okay. Then she looked back at me. How long did you date? About 4 months, I said. And you didn't think that was something I should know while you're literally designing our home? She asked. That's where the defensiveness almost kicked in, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't think it would matter, I said. But then I started to feel like I was hiding it, and I didn't want to keep doing that. She nodded slowly, but I could tell she was processing something deeper. Did Andrew tell you not to say anything? She asked. No, I said. He just said he didn't want it to turn into a whole thing. That wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't the full emotional context of that conversation. She stood up then and started pacing a little. I can't believe this, she said under her breath. I'm really sorry, I said. I should have told you sooner. She stopped and looked at me again. Yeah, she said, you probably should have. Another silence. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading without fully realizing it. When exactly was this? I told her. I didn't sugarcoat it or try to blur the timeline. And I watched her face change as she did the same math I had done. 7 years, she repeated quietly to herself. Then louder. We were together then. I know, I said softly. Were you aware of that at the time? She asked. No, I said immediately. I had no idea. If I had known, I wouldn't have. She held up a hand to stop me. I need a minute, she said. And that was it. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just grabbed her phone and her keys and said, I'm going to talk to Andrew. And she left. I sat there in that half-finished living room, surrounded by fabric swatches and design boards, feeling like I had just detonated something I couldn't put back together. I didn't hear from her for 2 days. Those were probably some of the longest days I've had in a while. I kept checking my phone, half expecting an angry message, half expecting to be fired as her designer. When she finally did text me, it was short. Can we meet tomorrow? No emojis, no tone, just that. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground. She looked different, not broken or anything dramatic, but more closed off. I talked to Andrew, she said right away. I nodded. Okay. He admitted that the timelines overlapped, she said. He said it wasn't serious with you, and that he didn't think our relationship was official yet. I didn't respond. That wasn't my place. But from my perspective, she continued, we were together. Maybe not labeled in a big way, but we were together. I understand, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. I don't think you did anything wrong, she said finally. Not back then. You didn't know. That was more grace than I expected. But now, she added, keeping it from me for this long, that's harder to just brush off. I know, I said. And I'm really sorry.
She nodded.
I believe you didn't mean to be deceptive, she said. But it still feels like a betrayal of trust. That word, betrayal, landed heavy. We sat there in silence for a bit before she continued. I don't think I can keep working with you on the house, she said. I had expected that, but it still stung. I understand, I said. It's not about your work, she added. You've been great. It's just, this is my home. And right now, it feels complicated in a way I don't want it to. Of course, I said. She hesitated, then said, I am glad you told me, though. Even if it was late. That was the one thing that gave me a small sense of relief. We wrapped things up professionally after that, contracts, payments, handing off design plans. It was all very civil, but distant. I haven't seen Andrew since. I don't know what's happening in their marriage, and honestly, I don't feel like I have a right to know. That's between them. What I do know is that telling her changed everything. I lost a client, probably a really valuable one long-term, and I might have unintentionally set off something much bigger in their relationship. But at the same time, I don't feel that weight of hiding something anymore. I keep going back to the question I had before. Was it the right thing to tell her? I still don't have a clean answer. All I know is that not telling her started to feel worse than whatever consequences came from being honest. And now I have to live with those consequences, whatever they end up being. Update. I didn't think I'd have anything else to say after everything that happened, but life doesn't really wrap things up neatly just because you've reached some kind of emotional conclusion. It's been about 4 months since I last wrote, and things have settled, in a way. Not back to normal, because I don't think normal exists anymore in this situation, but into something quieter and more defined. For a while after Melissa ended the project, I didn't hear anything from either of them. No messages, no follow-ups, nothing. Professionally, I moved on. I picked up other clients, stayed busy, tried not to dwell on it too much. But if I'm being honest, it stuck with me more than I expected. Not just the loss of the project, but the way everything unfolded. I kept replaying the timing of when I told her, wondering if there was a better moment, a better way, or if the outcome would have been the same no matter what. About a month after everything ended, Melissa reached out. It was a simple email. No emotion in it, just, "Hey, I wanted to let you know we're moving forward with a different designer. Thank you for the work you did. Wishing you the best." It felt formal, like closing a file. But at the end, she added one line that didn't feel purely professional. "I do appreciate that you told me." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It didn't fix anything. It didn't undo what happened. But it mattered. I replied politely, wished her the best too, kept it professional. I didn't try to reopen anything. After that, I assumed that was the last I'd ever hear from her. I was wrong. About 6 weeks later, I ran into Andrew. Completely by accident. I was at a hardware store, one of those big ones where you go in for one thing and end up wandering around for an hour. I turned down an aisle, and there he was. For a second, we both just kind of froze. It wasn't like the first time we saw each other again. That had been shock. This was something else. More grounded, but heavier. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by shelves of tools neither of us were paying attention to. "How have you been?" he asked. "Good," I said. "Busy." He nodded. "Yeah, same." There was an awkward pause, and then he said, "Can we talk for a minute?" Part of me wanted to say no. Not out of anger, just because I didn't know what good could come from it. But another part of me felt like leaving things completely unsaid would just keep them unresolved in a different way. So I said yes. We stepped outside, leaning against the side of the building like two people who didn't quite know where to stand in each other's lives anymore. "I figured we'd run into each other eventually," he said. "Seattle's not that big," I replied. He let out a small, humorless laugh. "I'm guessing Melissa told you she ended the project," he said. "Yeah," I said. "I expected that."
He nodded.
I wanted to say, "I'm sorry for putting you in that position," he said. That caught me off guard. "You didn't force me to stay," I said. "No," he said, "but I also didn't make it easier for you to do the right thing." I didn't respond right away. "I should have told her," he continued. "A long time ago. Way before you ever showed up. But I convinced myself it didn't matter." "That sounds familiar," I said quietly. He looked down for a second. "She was more upset about the timing than anything else," he said. Not even in a jealous way. Just the idea that I let her build a version of our early relationship that wasn't fully accurate. "That makes sense," I said. "Yeah," he said, "it does." There was a pause, and then he added, "We're still together." I wasn't sure why that surprised me, but it did. "That's good," I said. "It hasn't been easy," he said. "There were a lot of conversations. Some not great." "I can imagine," I said. "But we're working through it," he added. "Honestly, you telling her probably forced a conversation we should have had years ago." That's when I felt something shift in how I saw the whole situation. Up until that point, I'd mostly framed it as me causing a problem. But hearing him say that made me realize something else had already been there, under the surface. "I wasn't trying to blow anything up," I said. "I know," he said. "And I don't blame you for it." We stood there in silence for a bit. Then he said, "She doesn't hate you, by the way." I let out a small breath. "That's good to know. She just needed distance from the whole situation," he said. "Which makes sense." "Yeah," I said.
He nodded.
"I don't think she'll reach out or anything," he added. "But she doesn't see you as the villain here." "I never thought I was," I said, then paused. "But I did wonder how she saw me." "Fair," he said. We didn't talk much longer after that. There wasn't really anything else to say. No dramatic resolution, no big emotional moment. Just two people acknowledging something complicated and then moving on. Since then, I've had more time to think about everything with a little distance. Here's where I've landed, for whatever it's worth. Telling her didn't fix anything. It didn't lead to some clean resolution where everyone walks away better off. It caused discomfort, ended a professional relationship, and brought up issues in her marriage that had been buried. But not telling her would have meant continuing a different kind of problem. One where I was actively participating in a dynamic that wasn't fully honest, especially as I got closer to her and more involved in her home. And I don't think I could have lived comfortably with that, long term. The part 1 regret isn't telling her. It's when I told her. If I had said something at the very beginning, right when I first recognized Andrew, everything would have been different. She might have still chosen not to work with me, but it would have been her decision with all the information up front. There wouldn't have been that sense of trust being built and then shaken. Waiting made it heavier than it needed to be. That's the piece I carry with me. As for now, my life is normal again. Or at least, a new version of normal. I've taken on new projects. I'm more careful about boundaries, both professional and personal. And I've had to accept that sometimes, even when you try to do the right thing, it doesn't come with a clean outcome. If anything, this whole experience made me realize that honesty isn't just about whether you eventually tell the truth. It's about when you choose to say it. And that timing can change everything.